Not all wisdom is written in books, some is whispered from mouth to ear across generations. As these words float through darkness, the screen flickers to life. A masked figure emerges beneath firelight, eyes barely visible through carved wood. We move through silent temples, through corridors lined with ancestral statues, into moonlit clearings where night rituals pulse with unseen energy. Masks sway, candles glow, incense curls, ancient rhythms hum beneath the hush. Something sacred stirs in the shadows. Who guards the forgotten knowledge of Africa's past? That question echoes over hidden grooves of memory. Centuries of empire, colonization, and enforced religion have erased much from written record. But not everything. Some truths survived in the quiet spaces between. Somewhere beyond map and museum, spiritual custodians carry lineage through song, silence, and initiation. They recall secrets older than kingdoms, older than written law itself. These are the secret priesthoods, the hidden keepers who walk among us, yet remain unseen. This is not folklore or myth. It is the continuation of a cosmic responsibility, preserving spiritual wisdom when all else seemed lost. Empires tried to suppress them. Missionaries outlawed their rights, yet these custodians endured. They passed down invocation within coded songs, encoded chants within initiation practice, and preserved divine patterns through sacred gestures in dark chambers. The camera drifts past silent altars hidden behind pulpits, dusty shrines tucked away behind modern facades, and into spaces where initiation circles still hum beneath night's canopy. These priests and priestesses did not seek fame. Their power was never for spectacle. Instead, they served as living archives and conduits to spiritual realms, interpreting destiny, healing bodies, and balancing human to divine. And though written history may not record their names, their presence is etched in ritual continuity, in unbroken lineage, and in communities that still whisper prayers under moonlight. Tonight, we begin to step into their realm. We enter a world where wisdom is guarded not by libraries, but by lips and lineage. We remember that our ancestors entrusted something priceless, and some voices still carry the key. In the beginning, before kingdoms and written laws, there existed something older, a living bridge between humans and the divine. The priesthoods of Africa predate empire. They trace lineage not to conquest, but to creation stories, to ancestral beings, and whispers from the cosmic origins of existence. In many African cultures, the priest was both sacred scientist and spiritual steward, interpreting the code of the universe, maintaining balance between worlds, healing bodies and souls, and adjudicating justice on behalf of ancestors and gods. This role was rooted in a spiritual order, deeper than politics, older than soil. In Yoruba land, the Ifa priest, known as the Babalawo, serves as the interpreter of destiny. Through cowrie shells or kola nuts, divination reveals pathways aligned with cosmic order. The Babalawo translates messages from Orunmila, god of wisdom, into advice, ritual prescriptions, and moral clarity. Their knowledge is not superstition, but knowledge embedded in systems of sacred probability, passed down from master to apprentice through ritual apprenticeship, and memorized verses that encode theology, herbal law, history, and law. Among the Igbo people, the Afa diviners hold a parallel role, communing with the spirit universe through kola, nut sacrifices, kenga statues, and chants. They read ancestral voices and spiritual patterns. The Efa priest is both healer and guide, orchestrating offerings to Allah, Chukwu, ancestors, and personal chi. They interpret the moral fabric of existence, ensuring cosmic order is upheld through ritual practice. In both Yoruba and Igbo systems, priesthood is not performance. It is precise spiritual science, passed orally, but with unwavering discipline. Further south, in Mande regions such as Mali and Guinea, secret societies like Komo and Kono maintain lineage-based knowledge of spiritual codes, herbal medicine, and ancestral law. Komo elders literally wear masks in initiation, inheriting the power of ancestors and maintaining a moral order among communities. These societies preserve scaled-up versions of the priestly role: judge, ritual specialist, teacher, healer, and at times peacemaker who negotiates spiritual conflict. Terms like Babalawo or Bokonon become signifiers of initiation into sacred lineage, not simply titles. These initiate guardians undergo months or years of instruction in language, ritual patterns, herbal tonics, moral philosophy, and hidden lyrics. They are taught not only to perform rituals, but to sense spiritual imbalance in the land, the clan, or the individual, and to realign those disturbances through ceremonial precision. Their knowledge often traces lineage back to ancestral beings, cosmic guardians, and even figures that walk between worlds. In these systems, priesthood is neither superstition nor magic trick. It is the deliberate science of balance, coded through rhythm, chant, herb, and ritual geometry. Whether interpreting destiny in a Ifa verse, identifying spiritual illness through Babalawo medicine, or enforcing ancestral justice as Komo elders, these priests ensure that human communities remain aligned with cosmic equilibrium. They bind earth, ancestor, and divine within a living moral architecture. This ancient trust, passed through oral lineage, means that authority resides not in institutions but in spiritual training, lineage fidelity, and precise knowledge. When a Babalawo reads the shells, he is channeling centuries of sovereign discipline. When an Afa priest consecrates kola and libations, they speak the voice of ancestors held in memory. When a Komo elder adjudicates between families, they draw on titled authority that predates modern law courts. Priesthood, therefore, is older than empire, older than colonial rule. It is woven into the fabric of creation, that which came before conquest. Priests are living archives of ethics, metaphysical law, and communal medicine. They are interpreters of unseen realms, guardians of ancestral covenant, and custodians of spiritual power that persist in ritual reincarnation belief, sacred geometry, and spoken song. With each generation the torch passes, apprentices learn in quiet circles, memorize divination verses in hidden huts, shadow elder custodians during ritual season, and internalize spiritual science that cannot be reduced to text. In this way, knowledge remains living and mutable, part of lineage memory that adapts but never breaks. To view these orders as superstitious denies their sophistication. These systems are rooted in numerology, centuries-deep ecological knowledge, ancestral linguistics, symbolic geometry, and holistic wellness. Even today, they outlast colonial banishment and offer healing where modern systems fail. Far from being relics, they remain vibrant, purposeful, and relevant, as much spiritual technology as sacred tradition. The ancient trust still pulses beneath modern life. In villages and urban communities alike, initiates still whisper the names of gods through kola and divination. In the diaspora, young seekers reconnect to these lineages, honoring initiatory memory that transcends continents. The continuity of priesthood affirms that the cosmos still calls, and that African spiritual systems are not history. They are living doctrine, passed by ancestors to guardians who walk even now. This is the first layer of our journey, a world older than written laws, older than monuments, a world where wisdom is not stored in libraries, but carried in lineage and ritual breath. This is the ancient trust, a covenant between human and divine that precedes empire and survives in the quiet resonance of initiation and remembrance. Secrecy in African spiritual traditions was never about deception. It was a shield, a sacred armor designed to protect knowledge from forces that sought to erase it. When colonial armies and missionary zealotry declared spiritual practices savage and outlawed them, many communities responded not with resignation but with strategy. From West Africa to the Caribbean, secret brotherhoods and mystical orders emerged. Their purpose was singular: to guard sacred rites, ancestral laws, and the integrity of initiation from colonizers, outsiders, and the uninitiated. In these shadows, the spiritual pulse of nations was preserved. Among the Yoruba, the Ogboni society holds a special place. Far from being a secret club, Ogboni functioned as custodians of ancestral law and community justice. Its members were often elders or priests, trained in ritual wisdom, moral adjudication, and spiritual balance. They wore distinctive regalia, brass jewelry, leaf badges, and carved wooden crowns that signaled both authority and sacred obligation. In ceremonies conducted within hidden Dago shrines, Ogboni members enforced moral codes, mediated conflicts, and upheld traditions that colonial courts would later consider dangerous or superstitious. To join Ogboni was to embody cosmic responsibility, not political ambition. In Cuba, the Abacoa Society stands as a descendant of the Cross Rivers Ekpe or leopard lodge cultivation in Efik and Ibibio culture. It thrived in secrecy among Afro-Cuban urban communities. Abacoa men, initiated through esoteric rites, wore embossed overcoats, belts, and hats adorned with crocodile symbols, referencing the primordial power of Nzambi and the leopard spirit. Their rituals, chants, and processions were conducted in masked secrecy, blending indigenous language, CBD signs, and coded songs. Colonial authorities dismissed Abacoa as a criminal society, yet its true role was spiritual preservation, passing law codes, Odu manuscripts, ceremonial language, and moral discipline from one generation to the next, immune to external suppression. On the west coast of Africa, especially in Sierra Leone and Nigeria, leper societies arose within Mende, Temne, and Igbo communities. These societies embodied the fierce moral authority of ancestral predators. Members swore oaths of secrecy and only revealed their identity at night during rituals held in forests or caves. Body markings and scarification served as recognizable emblems, but only to those initiated. The Leopard Society acted as both moral arbiter and spiritual policing force, intervening when community ethics were breached. As colonial rule grew more violent, the Leopard Societies retreated further underground, preserving ritual language, sentencing practices, and spiritual symbolism that defied obliteration. Central to these orders was oral transmission and coded communication. Knowledge was not recorded in text but passed through whispers, gestures, and symbols. In CBD writing, enigmatic signs discovered in southeastern Nigeria and Cameroon served as code both for communication and ritual activation. Oven Bibi body marks, carved to mask beginnings and endings of verses, concealed sacred knowledge from prying eyes. Drums played rhythmic codes that communicated ritual laws, lineage information, and spiritual commands within covenant. Even the steps of a ritual dancer could be a word like scripture. These patterns communicated lineage, cohesion, and ancestral jurisprudence across time and geography. Secrecy, therefore, functioned as spiritual encryption. Each brotherhood was given coded vocabulary, sign language, singing bowls, or drums keyed to specific ancestral circuits. A handshake held encoded lineage. A drum cycle triggered invocation. The cadence of words opened gates to spiritual realms. Uninitiated guests might hear music or see masked dancers, but the depth of meaning remained invisible to them. The purpose of this design was protective. It ensured that sacred rites would not be profaned, that ancestral names would not be exploited, and that divine power would not fall into hands unprepared to wield it responsibly. Colonial and missionary regimes attempted to abolish these brotherhoods. They outlawed dances, designated masks as hidden idols, banned initiation rituals, and prosecuted those who persisted. Yet in forest enclaves, underground lodges, or remote caves, these societies survived. Ogboni ceremonies moved to forest shrines. Abacoa processions occurred under moonlight in sugarcane fields. Leopard society initiates met in dense woodlands far from colonial eyes. Brotherhood codes migrated into carnival rhythms, carnival masquerades, and diaspora rituals, invisibly shaping Caribbean offerings. During the Atlantic slave trade and post-emancipation eras, these secret orders served as spiritual anchor points in diaspora. The Abacoa societies in Havana reconnected members across generations and sponge boats. Ogboni symbols planted in modern Nigeria reacquired potency in Yoruba diaspora communities. Even in clandestine ceremonies, masked dancers dancing in freedom parades, Egungun revived through diaspora masquerades in Trinidad and Notting Hill. carried lineage traces of leopard and Ogboni customs. The purpose of these hidden brotherhoods was not merely preservation of ritual, but of spiritual ethics, ancestral justice, communal balance, moral reconstitution. They ensured that cosmic equilibrium was maintained alongside social order. In many communities today, disguised or undisclosed initiates continue these traditions in clinics, cultural centers, healing circles, and private shrines. Their visible lives may look ordinary, yet their voice is ancestral, their allegiance cosmic. In essence, the rise of secret brotherhoods was a strategic response to oppression. These orders illustrate how African spiritual systems prioritize continuity over visibility, lineage over display, covenant over conversion. Their secrecy was not deception, it was a method for ensuring that spiritual knowledge would survive violent erasure. Their coded ceremonies, masked dances, and symbolic alphabets became lifelines for tradition. And so, these brotherhoods still exist, not only as relics, but as networks of living spiritual inheritance. They remind us that wisdom is not public spectacle, it is sacred trust. They guard what colonial archives seek to digest and discard. They carry what missions attempted to Christianize and criminalize. They walk among us, silent but powerful, invisible but essential, a lineage of keepers, custodians of the old ways, entrusted with a duty older than empire itself. Initiation into secret priesthoods is far more than ceremonial. It is a transformative journey requiring sacrifice, endurance, and deep surrender to ancestral authority. This path is designed to complete a spiritual resurrection, to die to the everyday self, and be reborn into cosmic responsibility. Though sacred rituals remain hidden, the essential framework reveals a discipline demanding psychological resilience, spiritual depth, and bodily transformation. Becoming an initiate begins with relinquishing ordinary identity. Aspirants enter cloistered spaces, remote groves, hidden huts, or midnight lodges where they fast, meditate, and learn ancestral teachings under elder guidance. In many societies, periods of solitude and abstinence last weeks, if not months. During this time, the mind is emptied and reshaped. Doubts are tested and renounced. Spiritual illusions dissolve until the initiate becomes a vessel ready to receive ritual authority. This psychological recalibration, a kind of spiritual purification, aligns the aspirant with the frequency of ancestral power. The physical transformation follows. Candidates undergo symbolic rites that may include designated scarification, special attire, ritual fasting, or endurance tests like exposure to cold or heat. Such acts are not brutal, they signify shedding former attachment to flesh and ego. The body becomes altar and pain is reframed as passage. Herbal baths, ritual smokes, and anointed essences cleanse both physical and spiritual residues. As the body is consecrated, the spirits welcome their vessel. Central to initiation is the metaphor of death and rebirth. Candidates symbolically die to their former self. They are formally named, often in ancestral tongue, a name signifying spiritual lineage and service. They emerge dressed in new robes, carrying ritual implements, sometimes a carved staff, a divination set, or sacred bead garland that symbolize their new role. In this moment, they cross a threshold. No longer mere participants, they become conduits in ancestral flows. Gender-specific roles ensure a balance within priesthood. Female initiates, seeresses, shrine mothers, or priestesses undergo distinct rites aligned with feminine divine principle. They learn modalities of dream interpretation, healing, and prophecy. Male initiates, diviners, warriors of spiritual justice are trained in divination systems, ancestral law, and protective ritual. Regardless of gender, all initiates receive training in herbal medicine, spiritual cosmologies, and sacred speech rhythms. Their training encompasses both spiritual ceremony and practical application. They serve as advisors, counselors, and healers within community. Though most stories remain secret, anonymized accounts reveal kinship across time. One initiate recalls walking blindfolded through ancestral paths for days, guided only by elders' chants and ancestral echoes. She emerged with heightened intuition, speaking as ancestral messages that healed feuds in her village. Another candidate describes severing ties with urban life to spend months in a forest lodge, mastering divination codes and memorizing cosmic verses. Upon return, she led rituals to restore water flow to a drought-stricken river. In every testimony, the initiate shares that the transformation was not sought. They stumbled into it when the spirits chose them. The process tests not to break but to remold. Initiates report profound internal shifts. The ego softens, fear yields, identity reframes in service of collective balance and ancestral law. Emotional scars become catalysts for healing. Dreams become messages, guiding ritual precision. Gratitude and humility become daily posture. Many initiates describe sensations like ancestral nodes, linking their pulse to tribal memory, an internal vibration that anchors them. Initiations also confers duty. Once transformed, the initiate becomes part of lineage continuity. They offer divinations for community members, uphold moral norms embedded in ritual law, and mediate spiritual dissonance within clans. They bear responsibility not only for ceremonial duty, but for preserving sacred speech, ritual sequences, herbal protocols, and symbolic codes invisible to the uninitiated. In effect, they become walking libraries of spiritual inheritance. Importantly, initiation is not about theatrics or hierarchy. While former colonial perspectives painted priesthood as superstition, the actual practice is highly structured, disciplined, and ethical. Initiation demands integrity, oaths of secrecy, preservation of moral order, and refusal to exploit spiritual power. Initiates swear not only loyalty to ancestors, but also to the continued secrecy of sacred rites until they are ready to pass them to future custodians. In diaspora communities, modern initiates face additional psychological complexities. Many have navigated racial trauma, cultural dislocation, and identity fragmentation. To step into initiation is to begin healing inherited wounds while reconnecting to ancestral lineage. Initiation becomes radical reclamation of language, ritual memory, spirit systems, and community bonds severed by colonization and slavery. By the end of initiation, the individual has passed through inner death into a new life. They are renamed, consecrated, and anchored in spiritual covenant. They live hidden publicly but carry ancestral power openly. Their sacrifice sanctifies wisdom. Their rebirth secures it. This metamorphic passage ensures that African priesthood is not about rites performed for display, but rites lived within lineage. With each initiate's transformation, the spiritual flame continues. The old ways are not preserved in museums, but carried in human carriers, people molded by ritual, memory, and purpose. Therefore, no wisdom is free, it is earned. Colonization brought a deafening silence to Africa's sacred corridors. As colonial armies marched and missionaries preached, ancient priesthoods felt the weight of extinction. Christianity and Islam both played roles in suppressing spiritual custodians. They labeled spiritual orders as heathen, priests as witches, and rituals as barbaric spectacles. Colonial laws banned masks, ceremonies, and sacred gatherings. In some regions, participation in secret brotherhoods was criminalized. The spiritual authority of priests was delegitimized, forcibly shunted into shadows. Yet the silence imposed by empire was not absolute. In that void, whispered resilience took root. When colonial regimes destroyed temples and burned ancient groves, ritual life did not end. It shifted. Priests and initiates retreated deeper into remote areas, forests, grottos, mountain caves, and hidden courtyards. In Nigeria, Ogboni councils met under thick canopy rather than the village square. In Sierra Leone, leopard society rituals moved into shadowed rainforest crevices. In Ghanaian and Nigerian coastal towns, secret lodges were carved behind hut walls to shield rites from colonial visibility. Underground ceremonies persisted even as colonial courts outlawed them, and elders taught initiates chants in coded language imperceptible to outsiders. With direct ritual practice limited, knowledge found other vessels. Stories once told freely beneath night skies moved into folktales hidden in children's lullabies. embedding ancestral names and morals beneath layers of metaphor. Songs became coded parables, dance movements disguised spiritual glyphs, drumming patterns preserved judicial codes and divination sequences. Symbols like and CBD markings appeared in houses or carved into household utensils, secret scripts carried by those who understood. In diaspora communities, disguised carnivals, masquerades, and Christmas masquerades in Trinidad and Cuba secretly reenacted Egungun powers. Carnival disguises replicated leopard society moves. These cultural forms were not mere entertainment, they were encrypted ceremonies preserving spiritual meaning. Across the Atlantic in Cuba, Haiti, and Brazil, African priesthoods endured despite enslavement. In Cuba, Abacoa lodges convened at night in sugarcane fields. Initiation rites were whispered under moonlight, carved into dance steps and drum patterns protected by secrecy oath. In Haiti, voodoo priests conducted ceremonies in lacquer courtyards behind church walls, hiding veiled symbols underneath Christian altars. In Brazil's candomblé terreiros, practitioners preserved the language of Lukumi, drew coded patterns on altars and invoked orishas using Yoruba language chants in defiance of Christian proselytization. Among enslaved Africans, gods crossed the ocean in silence. The persistence of these traditions through diaspora is a testament to spiritual resilience. In many enslaved communities, priests were forbidden to speak ancestral names, yet they taught children in secret, talked offerings beneath hearths, preserved chants in drumming rhythms. During colonization, priesthood was demonized publicly, but practitioners persisted privately, sometimes secretly baptizing deity names as saints or saints' images as deities. This was not syncretism alone, it was survival coding. The whispers of priesthood cultures also spread via written texts disguised as secular poetry or folklore. Some elders shared stories in local newspapers or pamphlets that resembled legends to outsiders, but to initiated readers carried spiritual instructions. Songs recorded on 78s or later vinyl captured veiled vessel names, rhythms, and chants. These recordings circulated across plantations, neighborhoods, and continents. Even Christian mission schools sometimes inadvertently recorded praise songs cribbed from African cosmologies. Resistance took many forms: hidden ceremonies, coded oral systems, disguised text, veiled musical recordings, masked festivals. In some communities, priests purposely took on roles as healers or herbalists, offering medicinal and spiritual counsels in ways that colonial authorities overlooked. These healers preserved ritual language in consultations, combining spiritual formulas with herbal remedies. Colonial administrators often tolerated herbalist visits, assuming they were simple folk medicine, never realizing they were gateways to ancestral knowledge. Priesthood survival also capitalized on parallel spiritual systems. When Christian or Islamic authorities suppressed formal ritual space, practitioners embraced dual identities, one sanctioned by religion, another by lineage. They might pray in church but double their own prayers through ancestral rituals at night. This duality allowed continuity without confrontation. Spirits were honored even on the robes of colonial morality. In the diaspora, resistance continued through collective memory and cultural festivals. Haitian Vodou Sanson rituals included masqueraded spirits who paraded in disguise, celebrating sacrifice, prophecy, and social ethics. Brazilian candomblé festivals carried trance offerings and drumming disguised in Catholic calendars like Carnival or the Feast of St. John. These festivals were coded spiritual parades that brought entire communities into ancestral union. Even enslaved people understood that even if colonial authorities forbade worship, they could not erase embodied trance. Despite centuries of suppression, secret priesthoods survived, not as nostalgic relics, but as living systems of spiritual continuity and resistance. Their rituals adapted, ceremonies changed venues, and teachings were re-encoded through oral, embodied, and symbolic channels. Priests and priestesses preserved ancestral speech in dreamlines, songs, dance, and pattern. Initiates inherited spiritual codes not from books, but from embodied lineage. This resistance was not political activism, though it became political by force of presence. It was spiritual activism, the persistence of metaphysical sovereignty in the face of cultural annihilation. In doing so, priesthoods ensured that Africans retained connection to spiritual authority, moral frameworks, and communal healing, even when visible institutions had fallen. Today, echoes of this defiant silence reverberate across communities, claiming ritual again. The resurgence of Voodoo, Santeria, Candomblé, and indigenous African priesthoods is grounded in threads passed down through centuries of hush. Where colonial courts banned spirit masks, modern dancers now wear them again with ancestral pride. Where missionaries burned sacred groves, festivals today revive those spaces. Where knowledge was hidden in groove and dance, young seekers now trace those same codes to reclaimed meaning. The narrative of colonization is incomplete without acknowledging the spiritual resistance housed in secret priesthoods. They bore the burden of erasure and carried the flame of ancestral law. Their clandestine survival reveals that spirituality cannot be conquered, only obscured, and that silence, when held long enough, can become the vessel of unbroken tradition. The silence that followed colonization was not spiritual death, it was a strategy, a preservation through suppression, and the whispers that endured are the faint yet unbroken voice of ancestral memory calling through time. They never left, they adapted. In hushed ceremonies and quiet corners across continents, the ancient custodians of Africa's spiritual wisdom continue to walk among us, unseen by many, but known deeply by those who seek. Across Nigeria, Brazil, Cuba, Haiti, New York, London, and beyond, today's custodians blend ancestral responsibility with modern life, passing the torch of the old ways to a new generation, the awakened to lineage, spiritual authority, and collective healing. In modern African spiritual revival movements, traditional priesthood and healing remain strong. Yoruba Babalawos continue to read Odu messages through divination in Lagos, Aba, and diaspora communities in Brooklyn and London. In Salvador, Bahia, Tirero priestesses initiate novices into Candomblé lineages that descend directly from West African traditions. In Port-au-Prince, Voodoo Hongans and Mambos lead Laku ceremonies that still mirror ancestral liturgy, even as they adapt to new social realities. Far from museum relics, these priests and priestesses serve as counselors, herbal healers, ritual facilitators, and cultural educators, intervening in crisis, restoring balance, and offering spiritual frameworks for identity reclamation. This continuity deeply influences modern religions rooted in African spiritual science. Candomblé, Santeria, Umbanda, and Voodoo are not syncretic novelties. They are living evolutions born from Yoruba, Fon, Congo, and Igbo priestly systems. In Sao Paulo, Orisha priests blend Yoruba chants with Brazilian rhythms and Catholic iconography in terreiros across the city. In Cuba, Santeria ceremonies occur behind closed doors, using Catholic feast days to conceal spiritually powerful rites. Voodoo temples in Haiti incorporate Catholic saints as LWF facades, even as practitioners honor ancestral rites unchanged. These religions persist in shaping identity, politics, and resilience across generations. Faithful youth are returning to indigenous ways. Young Afro descendants are seeking initiation, studying divination systems like Ifa, Afa, and Bori, and learning herbal protocol from elders. In New York City, community-owned Yoruba centers host initiation weekends and ritual training. In Brazil, young leaders open cultural schools focused on ancestral dance, language, and lineage ethics. They forge sacred altars at home, wear beads and cowries with purpose, and reclaim ancestral names. These youth are part of a rising cross-continental cultural movement that refuses colonial definitions and demands spiritual sovereignty. Ritual footage reveals young people learning in intimate settings, an elder quietly teaching divination patterns to a child under oil lamps, an apprentice tracing NCBD symbols in clay, a group sharing kola nut under a banyan tree, while ancestral chants echo softly. Another scene shows a young woman seated before a miniature spirit house, lighting candles and arranging offerings, guided by an elder's gentle voice. These rituals, though held in secrecy or private spaces, are deeply intentional and deeply sacred. They preserve lineage through lived practice rather than academic theory. Modern African spiritual healers, herbalists, diviners, priest healers, serve local communities in ways absent from institutionalized medicine. They offer herbal prescriptions, spiritual cleansing, and ancestral guidance. In Lagos neighborhoods, Babalawos integrate psychosocial support with divination. In Brazil's favelas, candomblé priests intervene in community disputes and mental illness through ritual and ancestral invocation. In Haiti, Vodou healers address trauma and resilience in post-earthquake communities, grounding their work in ancestral covenant. The presence of these custodians is subtle. Many live ordinary public lives as teachers, lawyers, parents, but in private hours, they guard shrines, perform chants, and abide by oaths of spiritual confidentiality. Their influence is felt in coded festivals, prayer circles, and sequestered rituals, not in public spectacle. Yet their work shapes culture. Public festivals like Salvador's Festa de Yemanja or Havana's Santeria parades echo ancient deity homage. These events are outward symbols of spiritual continuity rooted in hidden guidance. Importantly, priests today are also cultural activists. In Brazil, candomblé leaders challenge land rights violations, racial prejudice, and ecological destruction, claiming ancestral land use rooted in spiritual relationship. In New York, Yoruba cultural centers offer legal clinics, mental health counseling, and cultural education alongside ritual. In Haiti, Vodou priests lead community healing circles and act as liaison figures when state institutions fail marginalized communities. Their spiritual work extends into social justice, healing, and collective identity. Yet the core remains the same: lineage, initiation, and covenant. New custodians undergo initiation, take spiritual names, swear oaths of secrecy, and inherit knowledge intimately. They learn oral verses, herbal tonics, ritual geometry, and sacred codes. They are guardians, if only in small circles, for a tradition too powerful to vanish. Many speak of dreams, ancestral dreams, guiding them toward initiation. Some recount rare visions or spiritual callings that felt impossible to ignore until they uttered ancestral names aloud. What we see today is not revival in display, but revival in reality. Hidden altars in city apartments, small terreiros in backyards, initiation lodges in forests, all affirm that priesthood remains alive. The shifting landscape of modern life, digital media, global diasporas, urban migration, has not weakened these traditions but reshaped them. Initiates now meet via video, share chants in online communities, sell sacred items through diaspora-run spiritual stores, yet the core remains in the flesh of lineage, breath, mantra, offerings, ancestry. So as youth reclaim the old ways, priests continue passing their wisdom, adapting ritual while preserving sacred laws. They defend ancestral memory in the spiritual interstices of modern life, ritual life that remains invisible to many but essential to those called to uphold it. They are the priests among us, unseen keepers, living archives, spiritual healers, and the current bearers of cosmic covenant. Their presence confirms that lineage never ended. The gods still speak. Ancestral power continues through ritual, delegate duty, and hidden continuity across forests, cities, and continents. And with each initiate who receives the torch, the ancient trust persists, breathing in secret chambers, whispered through kola, echoed in drums, and sustained in spiritual integrity. The drum beats soften, the firelight dims, and we now arrive at a reflection that echoes far beyond the screen. To remember the secret priesthoods and their timeless custodians is not merely to recite history, it is to reclaim our own spiritual lineage. These hidden keepers were never abandoned by the gods. Indeed, the divine thread that connected ancestor to initiate continues today, woven quietly through lineage circles, initiation vows, and sacred hushes beneath canopy and shrine. Their silence was never absence but a protection. Their secrecy was never shame but survival. Even in our modern world of noise, of screens, distractions, skepticism, spiritual authority persists. In huts, hidden temples, apartments, and forest lodges across continents, initiates whisper ancient chants, hold cola cups in ritual readiness, and call ancestral names at midnight. That continuity affirms a simple truth: spiritual power cannot be eradicated by force. It endures in dreams, in ritual breath, in community memory. For every colonial decree that banned sacred drums or masks, there was an elder who hid a verse in song. For every missionary sermon that condemned ancestor veneration, there was a grandmother who taught lullabies steeped in covenant. They did not vanish, they preserved, they did not disappear, they endured. As this journey reaches its close, we pause and ask, what ancient knowledge still sleeps inside you? What ancestral echo waits for your breath? There may be hidden gifts in your dreams, memories triggered by ritual rhythm, a sudden pull toward forgotten names. These are not coincidences, they are invitations. The gods never turned away. They stepped back, allowing humanity to choose reawakening, not just to their power, but to our own invitation into cosmic balance. Picture a hooded practitioner stepping into dawn light, masked and steady, a visual of timeless presence emerging into new awareness. That image marks the truth of what we've explored. They were hidden, not to be forgotten, but to be preserved for when we were ready. Now, dear viewers, let us pray in the way our elders honored the divine. Spirits of our ancestors, awaken us to covenant and balance. Ogun, sharpen our resolve for justice. Aset and Oshun, grant clarity of heart. Orunmila, reveal paths of wisdom. May ancestral memory guide each breath, each action, each surrender to lineage responsibility. May you be rooted in the dance between worlds, walking honorably in the footprints of those who came before. If your spirit stirs, speak it aloud. Comment, I hear the call, and affirm that ancestral presence surrounds us still. Subscribe if you feel the ancestors awakening in you. Let us carry this turning of the tide forward, not as spectacle, not as folklore, but as lived ancestral truth. Thank you, cherished viewers, for walking this path with me. Your presence honors the silent custodians and their unbroken trust. May their lineage live in you. May their wisdom guide you, and may the old ways breathe in your bones. May the spirits walk close. May their whisper steady your heart, and may ancestral memory awaken anew within you.